Sometimes the most telling thing about a marriage isn't a grand romantic gesture. It's a text message that never gets answered. That's the strange, funny little truth sitting underneath a moment that had Live with Kelly&Mark viewers laughing, then thinking a little harder than they expected to. Because on the surface it was just a throwaway joke during a segment about modern dating slang. But underneath it, there was something almost every long-term couple watching from their kitchens and living rooms instantly recognized. Here's what happened. Mark Consuelos was walking through a dating trend called cookie jarring, the practice of keeping someone on the back burner, one option among several, just in case things don't work out elsewhere. He explained it the way he explains most things on the show, breezy, a little professorial, clearly enjoying being the one who knows the terminology this time. And then he made the mistake every spouse eventually makes on live television. He said the wrong thing to the wrong person sitting 3 feet away from him. He mentioned that a telltale sign of cookie jarring is delayed response times. Slow texts back. Half-hearted engagement. And Kelly, who has spent nearly 30 years reading this man's every micro-expression, did not let that comment pass by unclaimed. She turned it right back on him. Are you cookie jarring me? It's such a small question. 4 words tossed off with a smirk. But if you watched Mark's face in that moment, you saw something a lot of viewers have come to love about this particular marriage on display. He didn't get defensive. He didn't scramble. He knew exactly what was coming because apparently, this is not a new grievance. Kelly explained herself. She admitted that she sometimes texts her husband while she is standing directly behind him. Not across town. Not in another room. Behind him. And she watches him ignore the message. Now, on paper that sounds almost absurd. Why would you need to text someone who is close enough to touch? But that's exactly why it worked so well as a moment, and why so many viewers couldn't stop thinking about it after the segment ended. Because it wasn't really about the text message at all. It was about being seen, or in this case about the small ache of not being seen, even by someone standing right there. Mark, to his credit, didn't try to talk his way out of it. He leaned into the bit with a line that got one of the bigger laughs of the segment, telling her that what she was describing wasn't cookie jarring at all. It was just him ignoring her. Which, somehow, made the whole thing funnier and more honest at the same time. He wasn't denying it. He was just renaming it. And that's the piece of this that deserves a closer look, because it says something real about why this couple has become appointment viewing for so many people who have never set foot in a daytime talk show studio. Most celebrity marriages that get discussed online get discussed because something went wrong. A rumor, a red flag, a body language expert picking apart a photo for signs of trouble. Kelly and Mark get discussed for the opposite reason. People analyze their moments because something is going right, and audiences are trying to understand what that actually looks like up close. Think about what that little texting confession really reveals. This is a couple who, after decades together, 3 grown children, and years of co-hosting a show that requires them to sit inches apart every single morning, still have small, ongoing negotiations happening between them. She wants to be acknowledged. He gets absorbed in whatever he's doing and misses it. That is not a made-for-television storyline. That is what actual domestic life looks like in a lot of households, just usually without an audience and a laugh track. It almost seemed like Kelly wasn't just making a joke for the cameras. It felt more like she was airing something low-stakes but genuinely lived in, the kind of complaint that only exists inside a relationship that has enough trust and enough history to survive being turned into a punchline. You don't tease someone publicly about ignoring your texts unless you're fairly confident the relationship itself isn't going anywhere. The joke only works because the foundation underneath it is solid. That's really the heart of why moments like this travel. Viewers aren't just laughing at a funny exchange. They're watching 2 people demonstrate, almost without meaning to, what emotional security looks like after decades together. There's no flinching. No real defensiveness. No performance of a perfect marriage. Just 2 people who know each other well enough to gently needle one another on live television and trust that neither of them is going to take it the wrong way. There's also something worth noticing in the timing of Mark's comeback. He didn't pause. He didn't look rattled. The response came almost instantly, which tells you this wasn't the first time this particular dynamic had come up between them, on air or off. Longtime couples develop a kind of shorthand, an ability to catch a joke thrown at them mid-air and lob it right back without missing a beat. That instinct doesn't come from a script. It comes from repetition, from thousands of ordinary mornings that never made it onto television at all. And maybe that's the real reason audiences keep gravitating toward these 2, segment after segment, week after week. It's not really about celebrity gossip. It's about recognition. Viewers see their own relationships reflected back at them, exaggerated slightly for comedic effect, but fundamentally true. The spouse who gets lost in their phone. The spouse who notices. The bit where you tease your partner about something small because the big things are already settled. There's a strange intimacy in watching two people who are legally, actually married perform their marriage for an audience without it feeling like performance at all. Some hosts manufacture chemistry. Kelly and Mark seem to be working from a much simpler formula. They just let people watch what's already there. It's worth zooming out for a second too, because this wasn't an isolated flash of chemistry. Just 2 weeks later, during a separate broadcast, Kelly turned to Mark as the show opened and openly admired him in front of the studio audience, telling him to let her take a proper look at him, calling him dazzling, teasing him about his tan while the crowd erupted. Mark, for his part, looked genuinely thrown, pointing out that she had literally seen him hours earlier that same morning. It didn't matter. She wasn't announcing new information. She was choosing in that moment to notice him out loud on purpose in front of everyone. That's a pattern, not a coincidence. Across different episodes, different segments, different topics entirely, the two of them keep circling back to the same emotional through line, paying attention to each other in small, visible ways and occasionally calling each other out when that attention slips. The ignored texts. The unexpected compliment about a tan. The teasing about who's cookie jarring whom. None of it is dramatic. All of it is oddly moving precisely because it's so ordinary. Some viewers online have started to describe watching the show as something closer to eavesdropping on a real marriage than watching produced television, and it's easy to see why. There's a version of this format where the flirting feels manufactured, where the compliments feel like they were handed to the hosts on a card. This isn't that. The pauses are too real. The comebacks are too fast. The mild embarrassment on Mark's face when he gets caught is too specific to be written in advance. What's easy to miss, if you're only skimming headlines about a couple joking around on morning television, is how much emotional labor sits quietly underneath a moment like this. Nearly 30 years of marriage means nearly 30 years of learning how the other person receives affection, how they receive criticism, how much teasing is playful and how much would actually sting. Kelly clearly knows exactly where that line sits with Mark. She can call him out for ignoring her texts and know, without a doubt, that he'll laugh instead of shutting down. That kind of calibration doesn't happen overnight. It's the product of decades of paying close attention to one specific person. And maybe that's ultimately the lesson hiding inside a bit about ignored texts and an on-air compliment about a tan. Long-lasting relationships aren't necessarily built on grand romantic declarations. Sometimes they're built on the small, unglamorous stuff. Noticing when someone walks into the room. Admitting, even jokingly, that you feel a little unseen sometimes. Being able to laugh at each other without it turning into something heavier. Perhaps the reason so many people remain invested in Kelly and Mark isn't simply because they've spent decades in the spotlight together. It's because audiences keep catching glimpses of something genuine in the way they navigate ordinary life side by side, the ignored text messages included. And maybe that's why a moment this small ends up staying with viewers long after the segment has ended and the cameras have moved on to the next story. So here's the real question worth sitting with. When was the last time you called out someone you love for not paying attention, and they laughed instead of getting defensive? What did that moment tell you about the relationship underneath it? Let us know in the comments what you think this moment really reveals about Kelly and Mark's marriage, and share your own favorite moment between the two of them. We'd love to know what keeps you watching.